Okay, I'm going to read from the Bible. This is Matthew 15:10. Jesus called the crowd to him and said, "Listen and understand. What goes into someone's mouth does not defile them, but what comes out of their mouth is what defiles them." Then the disciples came to him and asked, "Do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this?" He replied, "Every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be pulled up by the roots. Leave them, they are blind guides. If the blind lead the blind, both will fall into a pit." Peter said, "Explain the parable to us." "Are you still so dull?" Jesus asked them. "Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. For out of the heart comes evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what defile a person, but eating with unwashed hands does not defile them." Why I read that Bible quote, you wonder. We are in the period of 40 days after Father going to the spirit world, right? And my understanding is Father, when you go to the spiritual world, there's a 40-day period before you actually enter the spirit world. It's kind of like you're in the bus station waiting for the bus to come. So Father hasn't fully entered the spirit world yet. That's why True Mother is staying in place and attending to Father. When is the 40 days over? Huh? I thought it was the 24th. It might be the 25th. So what I want to say is, during this 40 days, there's a famous saying that I try to remember. It's something like, "When the eagles are away, the pigeons will start jabbering." During this past few weeks since Father left, there's a lot of jabbering going on. There's a lot of chatting that I don't know that it's all coming from a very deep and heavenly place. And my guidance to us all is, especially during this 40 days, we should be going deep. We should be really, connecting to God on a deeper level instead of so yeah, my recommendation for us all is, watch your tongue. Be very careful about speaking frivolously about God, to parents, to children, or even any brother and sister. Just be very, very careful. Because, our words are what defile us. So that goes for me too. I have to watch what I have give and take with, what I talk about, because it's so easy to get into a Cain type or a satanic even give and take. Not meaning to, but get drawn into it. So I want to encourage us all, even in these last few days of this 40-day period for Father, please go deep. That means, largely to go deep means to be quiet, ourselves. I mean, go internal and really connect to God and pray for Father's ascension and his work in the spirit world. Yeah, okay, that's what I want to say. You can take that out how you like, but I'm almost afraid these days to open up my internet connection because it's just filled with, pigeons jabbering while the eagle's away. So, okay, so usually on a Friday night we get like 5-10 people, something like that. So why are you all here tonight? You're welcome, but look what Josh Starr has started. What a heavenly troublemaker. So if you cannot see me, it means you're hiding behind the pillar. Maybe you're planning to go to sleep, but that's okay. So when Hyungjanim was here just a couple of weeks ago, Josh Starr did ask the question about 6 Mary. Who had heard that term for the first time that night? Okay. And so I assume most of you don't really have much understanding of it, and it's piqued a lot of curiosity. And many of you may already known something about it, but the question is, do you know Father's viewpoint about that? So that's what I want to try to bring out tonight. What does Father teach about this situation? Not what is found on the internet. So on the way back with Hyungjanim after that evening, he asked me, he was very impressed by Josh's question. Because his question was framed in the way, I want to understand this, but I don't want to go to the internet to look up something that's so heavenly and find, all kinds of negative viewpoints. So Hyungjin was impressed because that should be our attitude all the time. We want to know. It's okay to be inquisitive and want to know, but oftentimes the only thing we can find is a Cain type or a negative even viewpoint of anything to do with God's providence. So in talking with Hyungjanim, he was surprised that the lecturers who came earlier this year, Reverend Young from the headquarters, do you remember when he came for 3 nights? And did anybody get one of these at that time? Yeah. And you wondered, what is this? It had nothing to do with anything that he was lecturing. It was two of those things. Actually, please revisit it. It's full of wonderful information, including about the 6 Marys. You didn't know that. Actually, just looking at it won't tell you. But so Reverend Young gave me some lectures that he had given in the Philippines on this topic. So after Hyungjanim was here, he was thinking about sending Anthony Guerra around the country to teach on this. And I realized, if I wait for headquarters, he might be here next October. So I better look into this and come up with some kind of answer, right? So that's why you're here tonight, and I'm going to do my best to tell you what I learned. But to get in to receive the Word of God, you have to open up your original mind, right? So please open your original mind now. Got it? Are you there? Okay, good. Because our fallen mind cannot receive heavenly words. It's our original mind that can receive God's guidance. So that's why, we have to always, if you want to know heavenly truth, you have to go to your internal, deep, original mind. That's where you can receive truth and understand truth. Okay? So, there's 2 lectures that I would like to give tonight. They're both about 2.5 hours long. So me and Lisa might be here at the end. So I'm going to condense them, obviously. But there's a lot of things that I want to go through, even as a foundation to understand this concept of the 6 Marys. So here we go. What is the purpose of creation? 3 great blessings? Huh? Okay. Who said joy? We usually say joy is the ultimate purpose, right? Through the three blessings. But recently, Father started saying that's not exactly the truth. Joy is the result. What we need to know is what is the cause of bringing that joy. And the cause of bringing that joy for God is when He can have His completed children. Not just give birth to children, but actually raise His children to completion. So Father started teaching that, the purpose of God's creation is one thing: to make true parents. Who are those true parents? Adam and Eve. Did Adam and Eve become true parents? No. So therefore, God's purpose of creation was stopped, was thwarted. But that's always remained God's purpose, to have true parents on earth. Through true parents, then God can live inside them. They can become God's substantial body. Adam and Eve should have become that. So just having children, giving birth, does not make you a true parent. Father said God is not even a true parent until He raises His children to completion. Actually, any fool can have babies. I know some fools who do, who had. But, being a real parent and raising your children to completion is the tough part, is it not? And that's God's situation, that God has never been able to raise His children to completion. So Father said the purpose of creation is true parents. That's what God is looking for. So that God can have a direct experience through true parents of the whole world. A direct experience of also coming together as husband and wife. Adam and Eve coming together. That's the ultimate expression of joy that God is looking for. So joy is the result, but true parents causes that. Because once there's true parents, then the three blessings are fulfilled. Then it can multiply from there, and God's joy and man's joy just keeps ever expanding. So, how come it wasn't realized? We all know the fall of man's story, but I want to tell you maybe some different viewpoint on the fall of man that Father started teaching at the time he started to talk about the original divine principle. So Father said that at the time of creation, Lucifer had tremendous power given to him by God. Lucifer was God's agent to give direction and to get things done, and also to give education to Adam and Eve. So Lucifer is very powerful. Before the fall, Lucifer is very powerful. How about after the fall? Is Lucifer powerful or not? More powerful. More powerful. Why? Because he seized God's lineage. Father said Lucifer doesn't have creativity. Man has creativity, but Lucifer controls man's creativity through lineage. That's how Lucifer is powerful. And Father said the fall of man, in essence, is that Lucifer went from being other-centered to self-centered. Other-centered means I live completely for the sake of another. Lucifer's purpose is to live for the sake of Adam and Eve. God's attribute is to live 100% for the other. Lucifer became self-aware and self-centered, and that changed everything. In this book, it talks about recognition of others and recognition of self, which isn't good language. And I was studying this, I couldn't understand. What does it mean, recognition? It took me a few tries to learn this. It means, God's original attribute is to be 100% centered on others. 100%? What do you think? 110%? What do you think? 95%? The divine principle talks about we have two purposes. What are they? Whole purpose and in the individual purpose. The whole purpose should be this big and the individual purpose this big, whatever that percentage is. When Lucifer became self-aware, self-absorbed, then the individual purpose became this big and the whole purpose became small. So everything got turned upside down. So God's attribute, God's characteristic is to live for the sake of others. Okay, 7:32. Please silence your cell phones. I'm going to ask Uncle Bill if he can say a prayer for us to begin. We think of that like a bumper sticker. Oh, that's a nice slogan. That's a nice thing. But Father himself said that is the way of life of a godly person, to live for the sake of others. Did Father live for the sake of others? So the fall became, a recognition of myself and then filling my own needs, even at the cost of somebody else. Self-centeredness, putting the self-interest first. You need to do something for me. God's attribute is to live for the sake of others. That doesn't mean to say God never asks people to do something. But if God asks somebody to do something, it's for their benefit. So if Father embodies God's attributes and Father asked you to go to MFT or Ocean Church or as a missionary or something, is that for Father's benefit? Or for God's benefit? Or your benefit? Which? Oh. But is the sense that Father's telling me to do something from a selfish viewpoint? This is very important. It's not done, from a viewpoint of, my own self. I want to get you to do something to benefit me. That comes from Lucifer. So through the fall, everything was turned upside down. Everything was, knocked out of place. And human beings fell into a state of absolute ignorance and confusion, became primitive people, and took thousands and thousands of years to learn most basic, simple things. Because the way to God was blocked. When the way to God is blocked, creativity is blocked. Creativity is God's gift to us. When you're not connected to God, you cannot express your creativity. So the humans couldn't even do the most simple things for thousands of years. Why? Because they're very disconnected from God. And are human beings aware of God's providence or how the world works? Not at all. And Father said, by him bringing the truth, by him bringing the revealing about God and about Satan, then he became like a huge target. And also the Unification Church became a huge target. And Father said, I almost pitied people who joined the church because they get part of that target. So Father said, I wanted to always embrace the members and love them and spend time with people because I knew for God's purpose they are target. And, Satan has been out to crush Father or anything that Father loves. Anything that Father loved is a target. He said even when he had animals as a child, suddenly those animals would get sick and die. Anything that Father really invested in was in danger. So he said, I felt bad about even loving things or loving people because they became a target with me. So when Father met God, he met the God who was imprisoned, miserable, suffering. Not the God of glory or sitting on a throne or something like that. He met the God who had lost his lineage, lost all things, lost his position, and lost everything, and was lonely and crying and miserable. And that is the God that has motivated Father his whole life. That's what motivates Father to keep going his whole life. He knows how miserable God is. And God cannot get out of his misery without man. So Father's motivation is to free God from the miserable situation he's in. So, how did, one more thing. Humans grow up to reach completion. Who decides when they're complete? When they're perfected? God decides. Do humans decide by themselves? It's humans' nature actually to want to be more mature than they really are. You've had teenagers? Dad, I think I could drive the car. Can you wait till you're 10 years old at least? Who decides when angels reach completion or perfection? Human beings do. The angels were to reach perfection after human beings. As Adam and Eve are growing, Lucifer is their teacher. And Lucifer's task is to raise them up to reach a certain point. That point is when Adam and Eve come together in holy matrimony. Adam, who has God living inside of him, Eve, who has God living inside of her, come together in holy matrimony. Then God can experience that love through Adam and Eve. Then Father said Adam and Eve would go to God and say, hey, what about Lucifer? He doesn't have a wife. Then, based on that petition, then Lucifer and angels could get a wife. Where would that wife come from? Adam would make it. Yeah, that's what Father said. Huh? No. Father said Adam would make them. Would make those female angels. What exactly? What is Father going to be doing now? Wow. Huh? Reverend Young said? I didn't hear that. Okay, so, I mean, you have to take that on faith. I cannot prove that. The Bible doesn't say that. Father said it. I believe it. That settles it. Angels cannot multiply, right? After the female angels are made, can they multiply? Can they have baby angels? What do you think?
Adam's not that, though. Well, if Adam is then...
That's right. Because multiplication only happens in the physical world. Angels would not be having baby angel. So then the question, Father was asked the question, wouldn't angels get jealous? Even in the ideal situation, wouldn't they get jealous? Hey, how come we can't have children? And Father said, in the original idea in the spiritual world, there's no concept in the spirit world of having babies. Adam and Eve cannot have babies once they go to the spirit world, right? Can they? No. Once you're in the spirit world, that is over. I hope you know that. Hope you're not planning something, but you might have a problem later. Yes, you're a Mormon. Okay. That's another gospel. Okay, here's another important point that Father mentioned. Dominion comes about according to the order of completion, not the order of creation. Got that? So, who was born first? Who was first, Lucifer or Adam and Eve? Lucifer was. Who was to reach completion first? Adam and Eve. The archangel took on the selfish attribute of looking out for myself, and then wanted to reverse this and think that the eldest, the one born first, should be in the dominating position. It's not about birth order, it's about completion order. So Lucifer tried to dominate from the position, I'm the oldest. And the oldest, obviously, should be the one who's in charge. Hello. Uh-oh. Okay. So Lucifer is, some of you are getting the point. Lucifer is, raising Adam or teaching Adam. He's like, Adam's like the young prince who's being raised by a teacher. But the problem is the teacher starts to think, I should be in charge. I should have dominion here. Have you ever watched any Korean dramas? They're all about this, right? They all have this element of, of this kind of stuff going on. That's what I thought. Anyway. So Adam and Eve should reach a position where they become the ones to dominate Lucifer. Dominate with love. Not dominate in a negative way, but Lucifer wants the order reversed. The one who is the eldest to become the one who can dominate. So where does this self-awareness or selfishness come from? When Adam and Eve are being raised, who got the commandment? Who was the first to get the commandment? Father said Eve. Yeah. Then later he said Adam and Eve, but Adam was running around the garden and wasn't really interested. Don't women mature before men? That's the rumor. Huh? He was playing football. Do men ever mature? Did your wife tell you to say that? Who was holding the fruit? Who is in the key position? Eve. She's got the fruit. So whether God gave the commandment to Adam and Eve the same time, Eve is the primary recipient because she's got the fruit. Did Lucifer get the same commandment? Yes? No? No. Lucifer goes to Eve and asks Eve, What did God say to you? Lucifer becomes aware that God is guiding Adam and Eve directly on something that he's not a part of. He goes to Eve and says, "What did God tell you?" Means he didn't know. At first, Father said, at first, Eve didn't tell Lucifer about the commandment. But Lucifer bugged her and kept, telling her, you need to tell me. You need to, let me know. And finally, Eve told Lucifer about the commandment. I'm sorry, women, this is God's words, not mine. But Father said all women have to be careful about loose lips. And throw things if you want. Yeah. So, true mother had to be very, very careful about words her whole life. Because lots of Lucifers were trying to get her to reveal things or tempt her or pull her over here. And mother had to always be very, very cautious. So she often looked cold and aloof to many people. Because Father guided her, this is very important. Loose lips sink ships. You know that saying? So Eve told Lucifer, God gave me the commandment not to eat. We can eat anything in the garden except this fruit. And this was the moment that Lucifer gained what the lecturer calls self-recognition. He suddenly became jealous, suddenly became centered upon thinking about himself. Because he realized he'd gone from the number one, the foreman of the world, the builder, whatever title you want to say. Now, God is dealing directly with Adam and Eve about things that he doesn't know. Good question. I got 726. Is that what you have? Huh? 28? 27, 28. 28, really? Oh, I have 28. I'm just reading it wrong. Need glasses. I'm going to start at 732. The key person is Mother Mary. Mother Mary's job is to help Jesus to get married. And by the way, this issue with Father, if Father was so easily pulled out of position by being tempted by having sex with women, that means everything is a sham. You have to throw out everything. And Father said his biggest pain is when his own family doubt him and when blessed central families doubt him. He said, I expect it from other people in the world. I expect that. But from those who have experienced what Father's about and Father's love, to then doubt me is much more painful. This is a cross of love that he experienced. Somebody negative, somebody who doesn't know, criticizing Father is not that big a deal for him. But somebody who Father has raised up, invested in, given the blessing to, and other things, having these kind of doubts is painful for Father. And Father said, I too have to follow the laws of the universe, the laws of the government. And he talked about, when Jesus was asked about the coin, who should we give our money to? Jesus said, whose picture's on the coin? Caesar. So give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. But then he said, give unto God what is God. You better tithe. So Father said, if Jesus had just focused on God's law, which is tithing, and said, oh, you don't need to give anything to Caesar, what would happen to him? He'd have been attacked. He'd been killed, right away. So Jesus had to follow man's law also. So Father himself said, I have to do the same. I have to follow man's law and God's law at the same time. God's law is primary, but I have to be very, very careful. This lecturer, Reverend Young, said, Father's intention was to have 12, what? 12 Marys, no. 12 sons. So Father often listened to these elderly Korean women who were very spiritual. You know who I'm talking about? Grandmother Oak. I forget their names. There's like just a few of them who came with him from North Korea, who were very spiritual, but Father believed that they were sent by God to actually help him. One of these women told Father, for instance, about wearing holy robes and how to do holy offering tables. Father got that guidance from these ladies. And one of the things that they were focused on is Father needed to have 12 sons. And is it possible for one woman to have 12 sons? Huh? Easy, right? No. Okay. Just checking. So Father marries through mother, and the first child comes out is a girl. Uh-oh. Sorry, that girls, I'm sure that. But they were focused on 12 sons. So then Hyojinim was born. Who's next? Hyejinim, a girl, born and died after 8 days. Who's next? Injinim, a girl. Wait a minute. That's 4. We've got 1 son. You heard the story about True Mother, having a hard time from the elder Korean. It was really based on this issue of how can she have 12 sons? Have 36 kids. Okay, I'm getting to that. Or no, it's not. I don't mean to be exactly in order, but I mean to say that to have 12 sons, yeah, we can say yeah, it's possible, but it's you kind bank on that, can you? True Mother had many of her later children at the absolute advice of all doctors. Do not have any more children. I think from Sunjanim on. At least from Sunjanim on, maybe even before. She was advised over and over again, you must not have more children. And she kept on having children, really at the price of her life. Doctors told her, you can die very easily. Anyway, Father took the advice of these Korean ladies, and he was concerned, how could he have 12 children? 12 sons, 12 sons. So, with mother's agreement, Father had a child with another woman. That child is Sammy Park. Does anybody know about Sammy Park? Okay, Sammy Park is a son of Father's born to another woman who was raised by Dr. Bohi Park as the brother of Jinsangnim. Did you get that? younger? Much younger? Not so much younger, I don't. Oh, 3 years, yeah, okay. So he was raised by Bohi Park and his wife, and Ginseng Nim said that, when we were growing up, he looked nothing like the rest of the family. But my parents used to always say, oh, he looks like our grandfather, or great-grandfather, or something like that. But he was father's son by another woman with mother's agreement. After Sammy Park was born, mother went to father and said, don't do anymore. I'm going to give you the children you need. So then father agreed with mother and didn't do it anymore. And mother produced how many children? 14 altogether. Right? Later on, father said, I heard this from Injanim, father one morning at Hunduke was sitting quietly, and then he said to mother, wow, how many children did you have? And mother said, what, you don't know? No, she said, father, you know how many children I have? Yeah, but I just want to hear you say it. How many children did you have? And she said, 14. And father said, mother, you did it. You did it. You produced the 12 children that God needs. And this meant male and female, boys and girls. Because mother produced, how many sons did mother have? 7. Father had 2 children before mother, right? Who's father's children? Who's the oldest one? Sangjanim, Hejanim, sons. I'm sorry, sons. Hyojanim, Hungjanim, Hyunjanim, Kukjanim, Kwanjanim, Youngjanim. Youngjanim. How many was that? 9, right? Okay, so that's 9 there. Then there's also Sammy Park. Okay? Yeah, I don't know what else to say. That's what we know. 3 years after Ginseng Nim is 50 years old. So, 2. Sammy Park is on the East Coast. That's all I know. Maybe in Washington, D.C. Members who lived in Washington, D.C. knew him, right? He's with his biological mother. I don't know. No, I don't think so. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. That's what I know. Hejanim is from father's second wife, who I'm going to explain about right now. Okay? So keep in mind that father gets, there's 3 ongoing accusations against father, which all correspond to Lucifer's attribute. Father is accused of being selfish. Reverend Moon's just got you going out fundraising so he can live a rich lifestyle. I remember people telling me that on MFT, and I thought, he's not living a very rich lifestyle on my fundraising result, that's for sure. He ain't doing very well if it's based on my daily average. Woo! My goal was minus 35 a day. So Father's always accused of that, right? He's selfish. He's just using people for his benefit. You heard that? Father is a liar. He's a deceiver. He is a heretic. Anybody heard that? And Father is a fornicator. He uses his sexual organ for his own pleasure. Those three things are the attributes of Satan. As I already explained, Lucifer became centered upon the self. Lucifer then deceived Eve. Lucifer then used the sexual organ to gain control of the lineage. So, okay, getting back to Jesus. The key person in the story of Jesus is Mother Mary. Mary's job is, one, to give birth to Jesus, two, to raise Jesus to completion. What's completion? Get married. Why was Jesus killed? Because he never got married. Is that what the divine principle says? What does the divine principle say? The failure of John the Baptist. Huh? Then the three disciples. Those were all secondary or third level problems. The real problem, first of all, Zechariah kicked out Mary. Mary miraculously gives birth to Jesus anyway. How did she do that? She goes back to Joseph, who protects her. She has the baby. Father said Jesus' whole childhood is miserable. Why? Because Mary lost her position. Why did she lose her position? Because she was having sex with Joseph and having more children. And Father said once she did that, she became centered upon Joseph and these other children when she should have given her whole life to take care of Jesus. And the story of Jesus is that at 17, 27, and 30 years of age, he tried to get Mary to help him to get married. And Mary couldn't do it. I was with ministers one day when Father said, I don't know what you guys read in the Bible. It's pretty obvious that Jesus should have got married. And Mary blew it. And Jesus 3 times went to her, 17, 27, and 30 years old. And these ministers are like, what Bible is he reading from? And then later we had incredible discussions on this. Check your Bible. Father's no dummy. It's in there. So Mary, did an incredible job of even giving birth to Jesus. So she's a hero for doing that. But she couldn't fulfill helping Jesus to get married. Who should Jesus have gotten married to? John the Baptist's sister. Why? Why John the Baptist's sister? Who never heard that before? John the Baptist's sister. Okay. This is not in the Bible. Don't go telling your Christian friends. Read your Bible. This is what Father revealed. Mary should have helped John the Baptist to marry John the Baptist's sister. Help Jesus to marry John the Baptist's sister. Thank you. Elizabeth's son. Maybe. Could have been a distant sister. It's not mentioned in the Bible. Daughter, younger sister, wife, mother, grandmother, and queen. Daughter, younger sister, wife, mother, grandmother, queen. So, what is the Messiah's number one job on earth? to restore Eve. That's the number one task. That's Father's number one task on earth, to restore Eve. To restore Eve, Father said, I had to go completely the way of God because I want to restore an Eve who is totally connected to God. Therefore, Father said, I don't have selfishness in who I'm going to marry. I'm not looking for somebody cute or beautiful or something like that. With God's attribute, I'm looking for the person who can be the wife of God. You understand? It's very important. It means what Father is saying is I'm not doing things from a selfish desire to fulfill myself. I'm doing things for a desire to connect to God, to restore everything to God. So Father's task is how to raise up Eve, to fulfill all the positions of Eve. And Father said he had to carry the cross of love. Man's understanding of the fall of man and what took place is so shallow. Is that right? I'll give you an example of that. You may have heard this before. We were having a ministers' conference in Maryland, and Reverend Jesse Edwards was there. It may have been his first thing that he ever came to, I'm not sure. He was there, and we heard the Fall of Man lecture, and he heard that the fall of man was all about, sexual relationship between Eve and Lucifer and Adam, and he is a preacher, the son of a preacher, the grandson of a preacher, and he was clearly agitated and upset. And he was making a din. I don't know what he was talking about, but essentially he told Mike Jenkins and Levi Doherty and these people, that's it, I'm out of here. You guys are crazy. I'm going to sleep here tonight and I'll be gone in the morning. He goes to his hotel room. In the middle of the night, his grandfather, who's in the spirit world, came to him and told him, get up and read your Bible. And he knew what he had to read. He went to the Fall of Man story, and he read the Fall of Man story, which he's probably read 1,000 times before. But he said, these blinders seem to have been taken off my eyes because for the first time I saw clearly what it's saying. What did he believe the fall of man was before that moment? Disobedience by eating an apple. So next morning we're gathering for the first lecture. Who walks in? Jesse Edwards. And he's walking up to the front, and I remember thinking, Mike, don't give him the mic. I think to Mike Jenkins, don't give him that microphone. Oh my God, I don't know what he's going to say. Thank God Mike Jenkins was more tuned in than me. He gets the microphone and he says, I cannot believe how ignorant I have been. I thought the fall of man was an apple. And he said, in our church, we often have debates about what kind of fruit it actually was. This is somebody, at this point, he's, 50 years old at least. He's been a Christian and a preacher his whole life. His father before him, his grandfather before him. How shallow, right? And how difficult for people who have been taught that and have been teaching that to believe the whole story that Father brings. So Father said, everybody who believes the shallow viewpoint of the fall becomes like Father's enemy. When he brings this out, not only do they say, I don't believe it, but actually they want to attack him. So Father has faced that kind of negativity, anger, his whole life in trying to reveal the truth to people who don't have a place to receive it. Secondly, Father said he was tempted by so many women throughout his life. You may know the story when he was staying in Japan, at the landlord's house. The landlord's daughter comes to him naked, trying to tempt Father, and he had to, kick her out, resist it. And then afterwards, he was, had to be loving towards her, but make sure she understood. Father said his whole life, women have come to him to tempt him. I don't know, is Father very handsome? He was? He said he is. No, he said, I'm not very handsome, although my wife thinks I am. Right? I don't know. I asked this in Sacramento, and one guy said, all men are ugly. That I can agree with. Why would Father be tempted? Why would women want to come to Father? He's got the original seed. He's got the original seed from God. And women, without even knowing, want that seed. That's why all sisters are like madly in love with Father. Yeah, there's a lot of good men around. No, really. See, I think all men are ugly but good. So Father said he's had to carry the cross of love his whole life, being tempted. But of course, he must not be pulled out of position with this. He must not be tempted. If Father was tempted with this, what would happen? He'd lose his position. God's providence would be done. So Father's main goal is to restore Eve, to restore these 6 types of Eve. So there's a man called Jung-Hwa Park. Jung-Hwa Park is the man who Father put on a bicycle in North Korea and pushed to the south. Remember this story? He pushed him on a bicycle for a couple of 100 miles. And Jung-Hwa Park, kind of was in the church, out of the church. Faithful, unfaithful, back and forth. And some people in Japan paid him a lot of money to write this negative book about 6 Marys. He wrote this book. Then later, he what do you say? Retracted, thank you. Retracted the book. Retracted means I deny it. It's not true. I take it all back. Then later on, he was paid some more money, and he said, no, it's all true. So Father said, he took my teaching and perverted it by looking at things from Lucifer or Satan's viewpoint, looking at the same thing, but twisting it. Father was angry that, people listened to this rather than wanting to know what his Father's viewpoint. When I first heard about the 6 Marys was in Nansuk's book. Remember that book? What was it called? Shadow of the Moon. So, I think it was 1998, that book came out by Hyogenim's first wife, and she talks about this 6 Marys, and I'd never heard of it before. And I read the book. And I recommend you don't bother reading it. It's really horrible. But I read the book, and it's filled with nasty, horrible accusations against true parents. And, if you have give and take with nastiness, you start to wonder. So I didn't lose my faith, but I was like, what? How could this be? And and then I was called to Alaska right after I finished the book. I went to Alaska, and that's when I arrived in Alaska, and Father was fishing in the river. And when you fish in the river, it's freezing up there. You can usually stay there for 20, 30 minutes max. And then you come out and you stand by the fire to get chilled out, and then you go back in. So everybody was going back and forward to the fire. And Father was out in the middle of the water, and he was just standing there casting and casting for hours. And, as it got darker, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it gets colder. So everybody stopped fishing. Everybody's standing around the fire, except Father's still out there. And then finally, Mother went out and called for Father to come in. And Father didn't move. And then Mother realized what had happened, and she came and she asked two big American brothers, "Can you go get him? He's stuck. He cannot move." So these two big brothers walk out there, and they lift him up and carried him over to the fire. And of course, when he gets to the fire, Father's like, "Hey, leave me alone, leave me alone." He doesn't like to be helped, right? I saw Father once in the airport in Los Angeles. After 90 years old, it's mandatory you have to go on a wheelchair. And Father was fighting with this wheelchair guy. What do you think I am, an old man or something? He's 90 years old. So Father, they put Father by the fire, and clearly he was frozen. Dangerous frozen, right? That's dangerous stuff. And, I, like many people, they were crying. It was so, wow. Why, he's not out there fishing for fun. That's not fun. There's no fun in that. Father used fishing as the place where he made his what they call jungsung, his condition of indemnity. And that's how, when I was with him, I'm like, that's how he lives his life. That's how I've always seen him living his life. And I felt repentful that I had been swayed by this book. I still wanted to understand, but I realized this book was coming from Cain's viewpoint. And how easy for me to get swayed by it. I want to know God's viewpoint, but all I got is Cain's viewpoint, and then I was totally pulled over by it. But when I was there, I realized, the Father that I know is that man who's in the middle of the river. That's the Father I know. You can tell me this and that, and this happened and that happened, but the Father I know is the one I've seen, the one I've been moved by. That's the Father I know. So next day in Alaska, the issue of the book came up, and Father said, I'm not going to answer every person's ideas, but I want you to know I have never misused my sexual organ. Never once. That's what he said. And I believe him. I still want to understand more, but I believe him first. Then I want to understand. Not, oh, Father, you better prove to me, that what these people are saying isn't true. You better prove it to me. No. That means I'm swayed by Cain's viewpoint. So Father said he was mad at the Jungwa Park using this kind of terminology, turning something beautiful that he was trying to do into something perverted and strange and miserable. So Father's whole life is to to restore Eve in all of these positions, in these 6 positions over 8 generations. That's what he's all about. So the Old Testament story centered upon Eve as losing this. Jesus came, his mission was to restore Eve. That's what he came for. Wasn't able to do it. In the completed Testament age, Father comes to do the same thing. Who is the Eve-type person in the New Testament story of Jesus? No. Not Mary Magdalene. Mother Mary. God deals only with the result, right? But God can give the commandment. We can get the word from God, but then God deals with the result of what we do with the commandment. So Lucifer starts thinking about it, what's in it for me? Wow, this is unusual. This is and wait a minute, by the way, I don't have a counterpart. Father gave that direction because Adam and Eve are supposed to save each other for each other. That means that's super important. How can I accomplish that? I don't have a counterpart. So according to Father, this isn't in the Bible, but Father said, once Lucifer became aware, then God gave the commandment again to all 3, Adam, Eve, and Lucifer. But Lucifer, by this time, was saying, what did Lucifer say to Eve after asking, what did God tell you? He said, did he really say that? Let me tell you the real story. And ever since then, there's God's story, and then the logical other story that people want to express, which isn't always exactly what God's story is. Did Lucifer know everything? Obviously not. There was one major thing that Lucifer didn't know about, wasn't privy to, wasn't his to deal with yet. So did Lucifer know everything about God's providence? Apparently not. So that was kind of the beginning of the fall of man. Father said he wanted to teach this from the very beginning. But President Hyowon-Yu refused to accept it. Refused to accept to teach it. And Father said, President Yu, who was now in the position of the main object, a John the Baptist figure, if he doesn't unite with Father, Father cannot move. And there was many things that Father wanted to teach, but President Yu said no. President Yu wrote the Divine Principle in 1957. Right? But Father wrote the original Divine Principle before that. The original Divine Principle, Wally Wanbon, is Father's teaching. In order, at the time, in the mid-50s when we were being persecuted, especially over the Iwa Women's University situation, our members were very cautious and sensitive, and especially President Yu wanted to take Father's teachings and make it into something that Christians could understand and palate. Father's not that sensitive. That's my words. Is he? Father's pretty, hey, tell it where it is, let the chips fall where they may, kind of thing. All right? So I don't think any of us can accuse President Yu. The guy's amazing, all right? So I'm not saying this to accuse him. But I'm saying, actually, for those who are close to Father, how easy to make a little difficulty, intending well. And, many years later, Father criticized President Yu and then made his wife, Gilja Sa Yu, make some kind of indemnity condition with the divine principle. And, she brought out many different versions of the color-coded stuff, and then eventually the 1 hour that many of us have been reading. And Father said, you have to indemnify your husband's failure to accept what I wanted to be in the principle. So Father, cannot always just do exactly what he wants. He has to have an object and a condition to do things. So, okay. So the task of the Messiah is to take on the attributes of God. The biggest attribute is to live a selfless life, a life for the sake of others. What do you think? Father was successful or not? Also, Father had to make sure he's not tempted out of his position. He's not tempted to leave his proper position. How could Father be tempted? One way is through people trying to tell Father what to do, or what is the right thing to do. And Father said, anytime when I listened to people and took their viewpoint, it always ended up with more indemnity. So Father was often quite, from a purely horizontal place, kind of obnoxious or obstinate or very, Father, won't you listen? Nope. Also, to walk the path of the Messiah. When Father got this mission, then he went online, he Googled, what is the path of the Messiah? And he downloaded the manual and studied it on his laptop. Means there is no manual, and God couldn't even teach Father. Father had to figure things out for himself and then go to God and say, I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to do. There was no set path that he's supposed to go through. So Father had to pioneer the way. And, without knowing, without being guided, without somebody showing him what to do. Of course, he studied the Bible to see how God had been working through the stories of the saints of the Old Testament, and then through Jesus. He learned a lot through that. But how to go further than that, he's the pioneer. He's the one going the way. So, is it easy for us to understand Father and what he's doing over the years? Did anybody think you understood what Father was doing most of the time? If you really understood, then you must be the Messiah too. Guess what? So the Messiah had to trailblaze the model course for mankind to go, to escape from Satan's clutches, to dominate Satan, and to return to God. So when Father went the course to go back to God, then he taught us do the same. So the model course that Father wants us to go through is the course of tribal messiahship. Father went through the cosmic level messiahship. He asks us to go through the tribal messiahship course. That means to make myself into an embodiment of God, to make a beautiful, godly family, and then to live for the sake of others 20%. What do you think? 30. 30. Okay. 40%? How much should we live for others? A lot. A lot. I don't know exactly. The point is, when you live for the sake of others, then you subjugate Satan. When you live for the sake of yourself, you make a common base. So just being blessed by Father, just being a member of the church, maybe there's some benefit of that, but the real benefit is to follow the model course and subjugate Satan so that Satan has to let us go. Every step of the way, Father had to subjugate Satan so Satan couldn't accuse. Then Father can move forward. Likewise, he's telling us to do the same thing. Then we can be free. We can be free from the old way. So Father, comes to find the truth and reveal the truth. What's the truth that Father reveals? Huh? The 8 textbooks. This is what he leaves us behind. He also comes to engraft everybody to God's lineage. How does he do that? Through the blessing. And he comes to show us the model course of how to subjugate Satan. Okay? You're still wondering, well, what happened to 6 Marys? So Father has to recreate the whole world, which is separated from Satan, without Satan's influence. That's what he comes to do. And again, we have to understand what is Lucifer's viewpoint. Lucifer's viewpoint is selfishness. Living for the sake of myself. Concern for my well-being over the concern of others. Using others for myself. God's viewpoint is to live for the sake of others. To an extreme. Father was an extremist on this. Was he not? And then as you do that, then blessing comes to you in every possible way. And you have to subjugate Satan by being somebody who comes to a level of completion. So even though Lucifer is older than us, created before us, we have to reach completion, which brings him to submission. So we don't win over the archangel by just being a nice Christian. You have to actually bring him to submission by showing that you can do what he cannot do, which is to sacrifice for the sake of others. So, let's go to the 6 Marys, shall we? First of all, Father said he never used that terminology, 6 Marys. That is a perversion of his teaching. What Father taught is, at the time of the fall, there were 6 Eves who fell. Oh, you thought there was only one? Oh. Father said there were 6 Eves who fell. Eve the daughter, Eve the younger sister, Eve the wife, Eve the mother, Eve the grandmother, and Eve the queen. All the same person. Right? Fergie, you are a daughter of somebody? Yeah. You are a sister to somebody? You are a wife to somebody? A mother? Grandmother? Not yet. Not yet. That's all one person. So Father said the 6 Eve that God lost. The daughter, younger sister, wife, mother, grandmother, and queen. And Eve was lost over 8 generations also. First of all, the teenage Eve. The Eve of her 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s. When a woman is in her teens and going through puberty, then certain feelings come out. She becomes a woman. That's a teenage woman. How about in your 20s? Are you a little bit more mature? You think a little bit differently in your 20s? How about after getting married? How about after having children? How about raising teenagers? And you find out who you really are. How about raising grandchildren? How about, being totally connected to God? That's what Father's talking about. 6 Eves over 8 generations. That's what Father was teaching in the 50s. I have to restore these women. 6 Eves. So God, at the fall, God lost his wife. Who's his wife? Eve. Adam lost his wife. Who's his wife? So Father said, there are different. Eve is in the position to be wife to many different people. Wife of God, wife of Adam, also wife of a grandfather, as Adam becomes a grandfather, wife of a father, and wife of older brother and younger brother. So Father's teaching is like that. This is very Korean type teaching. The reason I'm not using the PowerPoints is they're so complicated. They just threw me for a loop. It took me 3 times to watch this lecture to even understand anything. It's very, but it's like Oriental ways of thinking. But this is what Father was teaching people about the loss of Eve. The 6 Eves. He's talking about Pikaerun. I don't know how to say it. Pikaerun, something like that. The spiritual groups were teaching and practicing that the way that the womb is cleansed is through having sex with the leader of your group. So this was and is still practiced in spiritual groups in Korea. And there are books written about it. I mean, there's one ex-member from Finland who wrote this awful book, awfully difficult to read book about this whole thing that Father came out of North Korea where this kind of thing was practiced, so therefore 2 and 2 equals 17 or something. I don't know much about it. Shamans. Okay. It's fairly common in Korea, apparently, with spiritual groups. Yeah. 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 And again, it would mean if Father was just doing that, for his own desire or something like that, it would mean that Father's a creep. It could be, but I don't believe there's any evidence that makes me believe in that. But I think, again, the providence isn't like, okay, now you do this, now you do this. Just follow the manual. Father's trying to, forge the way, and he's being blocked at every turn, and he's trying to figure out what's the best way to go. And, I'm sure Father changed the course of the providence many times. So many times Father said something, then later on he seemed to contradict it. But the providence moved. The providence changes to, okay, that way got blocked.
Sorry, his father.
Huh?
There goes the neighborhood.
There goes the neighborhood. Okay, it's 9:30. Okay. Tomorrow we have the International Day of Peace here. If you want to come and join us, well, that would be jolly good. And come at 8:30. You are taking on this position of Eve. You will become the bride of the Messiah. So, so she moved in with Father, and she became pregnant. And Father told her, "You have to go to another country. You have to go to Japan to have this baby." This may be, I don't know all the reasons, and it wasn't explained. It may be because of legal situation, or more likely to do with Miss Che's family, who were still persecuting Father. And so, the legal divorce with Miss Che didn't come through until, I don't know, 2 or 3 years later, quite a while later. So this lady went to Japan, and Father sent one member with her, Mr. O, to take care of her. She smuggled her way on a ship to go to Japan, and in Japan she gave birth to a son, Heejanim. And then when she wanted to come back to Korea, she couldn't get on a smuggling boat with a baby. They wouldn't let her go with a baby. And she was so weak anyway. And so Mr. O, the man who went with her, and she made friends with somebody in the immigration department in Japan, a man who was half Korean and half Japanese. And they became very friendly with each other, and he agreed to help her to get a visa. And it looked like the visa was all in place. She was going to get a passport and a visa on this one particular day. Mr. O left her thinking it was all set in place. Then the man from the immigration office showed up at the house and raped her. She said, "I tried to fight him off, but I was so weak after having a baby and so little food, and I was overpowered." She said, "It wasn't like a man was raping me, it was like Satan himself was raping me." After that, she said she wanted to kill herself. She couldn't face Father, she couldn't meet him, and there was no way to overcome this terrible thing that had happened to her. So with awful pain in her heart, she wrote a letter telling Father everything, and telling Father that she wasn't coming back. When Father received the letter, he said, "No matter what, I will put you into the original position of Eve, even if I have to make indemnity conditions at the price of my life. You were the victim here, not the perpetrator, and I will make whatever conditions are needed." And he pleaded for her to come back to him. Miss Kim said, "I felt like I would only be a burden to Father and all the members, and therefore all the people of the world would look down on me, and therefore they would look down on Father and look down on God. Also, I felt Satan would laugh at God." So she made the decision that she would not fulfill this position. She cut off all relationships with everyone. She sent Heejanim to Father, and she went to live in a cave for 3 years, living on berries and whatever she could find. It was at this time that the early grandmothers of the church now realized that Father's providence was in danger, because restoring Eve was becoming very, very difficult, obviously. And they were advising Father what he needed to do. So this Miss Kim came back to the church many years later. She said, "I came back after True Mother had fulfilled her responsibility for the first 7 years. And she said, I couldn't even look at true parents because I had failed them, and mother had to indemnify my failure. And one day she went to the Hanmadong church and sat in the back of the room and just sat there crying and crying, didn't want to show her face. But father and mother saw her and they wept and wept all together. And from that time, true parents embraced her and forgave her whatever had happened. So Reverend Young said this was a really deep, wonderful lady, so loving and wonderful. And she had lived her whole life from that time, every day making strong conditions for true mother's victory, knowing what true mother must be going through. So he said, when we think of the first and second wives, we must not talk about them lightly or flippantly. You have no idea how Satan was attacking at that time. We don't know the truth of the whole situation, and Father doesn't talk about it. We should pray in repentance that, God has had to suffer for this kind of situation, that Father has had to suffer. If Miss Che had been successful, then Father would have gone a much easier course. Chung-Hwa Park is the one who knew Miss Che. And he started this rumor about the 6 Marys, and he was the one who picked up on the persecution of Father over the second wife situation. This is an incredible heartache for Father. So that's the situation with the second wife who had a child, Heejanim. Heejanim was killed. I think he was like 12 years old or 13 years old. He was going witnessing. Apparently he was like a model child, just a beautiful son. He was going witnessing. He was on a train. He leaned out of the train to wave goodbye to somebody and hit a flagpole and died instantly. The second son. Always the second son, right? Heejanim died. The second son born in America, Heejanim died. She was blessed in 1998 to Socrates. I think Socrates. Oh. He was speaking in English to the members? You did. According to Reverend Young, no more that he knows about. Yeah. I asked him specifically, is there more children that we're going to hear about later? Oh, yeah. So I asked him about that, and he said, no, that's totally a fabrication. That's not the truth. And of course, that is Satan's attack. So the accusation of the 6 Marys, I don't even understand exactly what they say, but somehow Father had sex with 6 women in order to restore 6 Eves or Marys, as Chung-Hwa Park says. Father had sex with 6 women. Reverend Young said that's not true. He also said, but Father, from heaven's viewpoint, Father should be able to have sex with as many women as he needs to. It means, not literally, it means the attitude that Father should be able to do what God's providence is. If he's actually God's representative, then he has to do what he has to do. When I first joined the church, this is a little aside. When I first joined the church, an elderly Korean lady who I lived with told me, I don't know if this was just anecdotal or actual fact. She said, Father had to control himself 100%. He had to control himself where 12 women came in a room naked. And he had to control his body and not be tempted. And I said, boy, he is the Messiah. but that stuck with me, Yeah, he needs to have that kind of control. He needs to be able to, not be using his sexual desire in a selfish way. If he was, like I say, it's all over. So, sorry, it's getting late. Father went through the 7 deaths and resurrections that Hyungjanim talks about in order to bring the truth. The truth is the 8 textbooks. The second great thing that Father brings for mankind is the holy wine. The holy wine is the way that we can be restored to God's lineage. And after 1999, in 1999, Father brought Lucifer to absolute surrender in South America, in that little hotel. Anybody went there? Yeah? Puerto Limpo. Yeah. Tiny little room, right? Smaller than a Motel 6. I didn't see any, but I'll take your word for it. Anyway, after that, 1999, then Father has authority to give the blessing to the whole world. That's why after that, we were able to spread the holy wine liberally, freely. It's conditional, but, based on the condition of Father's totally brought Lucifer to surrender. So we're living at the time when the evil world is coming to an end and God's world is going to rise. Based on what? Based on the completion of Adam and Eve. What's going to happen on Foundation Day is that Adam and Eve, father and mother, are going to receive the blessing, and God living inside of them, dwelling inside, fulfilled, completed, perfected Adam and Eve, will experience unity. From that time on, God's providence unfolds. This is what Father's been teaching, the whole God of day and God of night. We have to remember that, Lucifer or Satan, or Satan's instruments, or Satan's, what should I say? People Satan wants to use, wants to be able to criticize and pull down God's providence. Wants to criticize and pull down what Father has done and accuse him of being selfish, a liar, and a fornicator. And secondly, Lucifer wants to accuse true mother, who is Eve. So accusing true mother that, she didn't fulfill her mission. She wants to, to the last minute, Lucifer is still, fighting. I know you're going to say Father subjugated Lucifer in 1999, but there's many Lucifers. There's satanic forces. And we all have to be very careful ourselves about what we talk about, and we should always pray before we speak and try to get God's viewpoint. The whole thing about 6 Marys is coming from Cain's viewpoint, Lucifer's viewpoint. Coming from God's viewpoint, it's actually very beautiful that God wants to restore all that was lost. That's what Father's been focused on, restoring all women. Through women, God wants to restore all men. When there's no longer Satan's attributes living inside of people, then we will have the kingdom of heaven on earth. Why doesn't it go together? Can you explain? What Reverend Young explained was that Father wanted to have 12 sons. He agreed with that. Did it change? Obviously. Why it changed, I don't know. Yeah. Oh, I see. I don't think so. I'm hoping that Reverend Young himself or Anthony Guerra will come around and teach this more thoroughly than I have. And then, please pray about any questions you have before that, anything that is not clear or anything that, this is brought up. Please pray about it and bring those questions to the right people. You understand? I'm sorry? He didn't teach this, though. He didn't teach about the 6 Marys that time. Oh, he talked about but that's in his lecture slides. If you look at this book that we bought at that time, his lectures are in there. They're not explained in there. They're just slides. But I'm well aware there are many other questions that can come out of this. There's a lot that's unresolved, and maybe you're not satisfied. There's more things you want to know. But what I'm saying is, please pray about it and prepare your questions. And when a lecturer comes who knows more than I do, maybe he can answer those questions. Yeah, the spiritual groups in Korea, I think until this day, have practiced this kind of thing. And that's probably where Sammy Park got this whole idea. That, you know what, right? Anyway, why that? Because John the Baptist is in the position of the brother. He's not in the position, he's the half brother of Jesus. Is he older or younger than Jesus? Older. So John the Baptist is like in Lucifer's position. Jesus is in whose position? Adam. So Lucifer stole Eve away from Adam. In restoration, Lucifer has to give Eve back to Adam. John the Baptist has to willingly hand over his sister. Then Jesus has permission from the one representing Satan to take this person as his bride. That's not in the divine principle, certainly not in the Bible. But this was what Father wanted to teach from the beginning. Huh? Right. So you can read into that, the whole Abraham and Sarah. Father's been revealing this over the years, right? So John the Baptist, his failure was not just to believe in Jesus for himself, but he had to actually do something, which is hand over the bride to Adam, Jesus. So at 30 years old, when Mary couldn't fulfill this, then Jesus wipes his hands of Mary and starts witnessing. And he goes out, picks up a couple of good fishermen and tax collectors and the rest, and he makes a spiritual family, a secondary course. And so now somebody's got to inherit the position of John the Baptist. The person who inherits that position is Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot. What is Judas Iscariot famous for? Betraying Jesus. He betrayed Jesus. Jesus should have married Mary Magdalene. Who is Mary Magdalene? She is the engaged partner of Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot should hand over Mary Magdalene to Adam, to Jesus. It's in the Chansangam. Huh? It would make a nice movie. Did he know that? I'm sure Jesus told him. But Judas was jealous and couldn't do it. And not only could he not do it, then he wanted to get rid of Jesus because Mary was attracted to Jesus, of course. He's like father. He's got the seed. He's handsome, I guess. So when that failed, then Judas, betrays Jesus, and Jesus goes to the cross. So then, at the time of the second advent, who's in the position to inherit Mary's position? Father's mother. Chungmonim. Father's mother. What is father's mother's responsibility? Find the wife for father. Did she do it? She did it. She did it. Father's mother inherited the position of Mary by virtue, if you had Reverend Young's lecture, he talked about this. This is the first time I'd heard this. Father's mother was engaged to be married to a very well-to-do, respectable kind of person. In 3 days, she was going to be married, and then she got some revelation, don't marry him. Instead, marry this guy, who was much less respectable, much less, in external terms, much less cat. So father's mother, 3 days before the wedding, cut it off. And she went with father's father. And then she had father. So having father is first, but then the next thing is she's supposed to get father married. She did that. Father married in 1944, 45, I forgot. He married Miss Sungil Che. Anybody seen a picture of Miss Sungil Che? If you go to Michael Breen's book, Sun Myung Moon, The Early Years, is a picture of father's first wife. That's the only picture I've ever seen of her. So father got married, had a child, and then father went to North Korea. And Yep. I'm sorry. Yep. She found the first wife. We used with a matchmaker, with somebody, which was the normal thing to do. But she facilitated father getting together with this Miss Che, who was from a very prominent Christian family, and she really loved father in the beginning, and then father went off to North Korea, in the northern part of Korea in 1946. June 6th, the legend says that father was out shopping, and then he dropped everything and got a revelation and went north. Right? Michael Breen says he interviewed everybody who was around father at that time. The reality was, father found out that Mr. Baek Moon Kim, who father was part of his church, was going north to do a revival, and especially to meet a lady who was known as the wife of Jehovah. So father went home and told his wife, I'm going with Baek Moon Kim to North Korea. Once I get established, come and join me. So father went to North Korea. He got put in jail. And, eventually, of course, he went to Hungnam prison. But his wife, a few times, 2 or 3 times, tried to go north. And by this time, the border had been closed. She couldn't get north. She tried a few times and couldn't get up to the north to join father. So deprogrammers often say that father abandoned his wife because of this legend, but that's not exactly the way it happened. For father, it's like, okay, I got a revelation. But even the revelation of the divine principle came over many years. It sounds like it's a one-time thing. It's more dramatic, maybe. But again, according to Michael Breen's interviews, including with Miss Che, Father actually went to and told her where he was going and where to meet him, how to come together. I don't know. Maybe I don't know that Father wrote that autobiography anyway. So Miss Che is in the position of the bride, but as you know the story, Father was in North Korea, he goes to Hungnam, he meets her later, but she had lost faith, and she was very much influenced by Christian ministers and her brothers, and they would come and beat Father up in South Korea, and then eventually wanted a divorce. And I'm talking now like 1953, 54. It became obvious that she couldn't fulfill the position. You think this is painful for Father or not? He said, even when he was 85 years old, he said, the biggest heartache in my life is I lost my first love. So we can see it as a story, he did this and then that happened and this happened, but there's all kinds of heart that's involved. And Father was devastated that she couldn't make it. He had told her from the beginning, he said that our life is not going to be normal. For the first 7 years, it's going to be really difficult. He told her that. But she couldn't keep faith. Yeah, when she came to the small hut, Father was teaching Wonpil Kim and somebody else, and Wonpil Kim said, Mrs. Che and her son show up at the hut. Father hasn't seen them in years. Father goes outside to greet them, and the members are there, and then Father was kind of just standing there, and he needed Wonpil Kim's permission to go with his wife. And Wonpil Kim said to the rest of his life, he regretted that he wasn't smart enough to say, Father, please go with your wife. And Father took that as, I haven't raised up these people enough. They don't understand, so I'm going to just focus on them. He couldn't just go with his wife. I think early on that, she certainly knew that he had a special mission. Messiah, I don't know. No. The first marriage didn't succeed. Father then is separated from Miss Che, and she wants to get a divorce. At that time in Korea, the whole government situation was up in the air, Korean wartime. It wasn't like you could just go down to City Hall and deal with marriage license and things like that. Those things weren't in place. It was a crazy time, but for all intents and purposes, it was over. So, then we go to the second wife. Do you know about the second wife? Okay. So, Reverend Young, who was the teacher here earlier this year, he said he's the head of the education department. And he was looking through our museum at Sun Moon University, and it's got all kinds of stuff from way back in Father's early life. And he found this one book of poetry. And the book of poetry was written by a lady, Miss Kim, and it was talking about how Father has chosen me to bear his children, and I have to fulfill this mission, and it's going to be so difficult, but I pledge myself to it. And he said, I was reading this book of poems, and I was crying, but I don't know who it is. And he said it didn't make any sense, because he'd never heard about this other woman before. So he went to ask Johann Lee, early member, oh, can you tell me who this woman is? And, what's all this about? And Johann Lee said, no, I'm not going to tell you anything until Father decides to talk about it. And then he went to see Dr. Sang-Hun Lee. Sang-Hun Lee is the man who wrote Unification Thought and Victory Over Communism, and then later Messages from the Spirit World, right? So he's a really intellectual guy. So Reverend Young went to see him, and he told Reverend Young where this lady lived, and he said, you need to go visit with her and ask her directly yourself. So he goes to this place in some town, I forget the name of the town, and he meets this lady, Myung Hee Kim, I think her name is. This is, I think, 1954. Yeah. There's no official divorce at this point. But again, it's a crazy time, and it's not like everything's easy to just put in place. So Father says, this lady meets with Dr. Young, and she says, I'm not going to tell you anything unless you get Father's permission for me to do so. So he went and asked through somebody for Father's permission. And Father said, yes, I give permission for her to tell you the story because you're the head of the education department. So she told Reverend Young her story. And her story is, I'm sorry? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So she said, one day Father called me to the House of Three Doors in Seoul. Before there was Chungpadong, there was a house where Father originally put the sign on the door, right? The very first place, a tiny little place called the House of Three Doors. So Father called me to this place, and Father told me, I have been chosen for the mission of Eve. And he said, the first mother has failed, and now you have to establish your own condition of indemnity, and you have to follow Father with absolute faith and love and obedience, and you have to take up the mission of Eve. And she said, no, I cannot do it. And Father 3 times asked her, and she was trembling, and she felt unprepared, but she said she remembered when she was a child that she had some kind of revelation that one day she was going to marry the most important man on earth. So she told Father, I am absolutely insufficient for the job for the task that you're asking me. I have great limitations, but if you will lead me and guide me, then I will do my best. And she accepted the mission. So Father told her, we cannot have an official wedding at this point. But you are